Okay, so the purpose of this video then is to go over language paper 1 sections A and B. The extract that we're looking at in this video is from Glass, Bricks and Dust. So most of you should have either completed this assessment in the walking talking mock or potentially in class with your teacher. So this video is just a quick revision one to sort of go over any points that your teachers may have already gone over with you before your exam. So before we start looking at the actual questions themselves, we're going to have a look at the assessment objectives, okay, or the AOs. Now, there are 3 AOs for section A and 2 AOs for section B. So in section A, which is the reading section, we have AO1, which is to identify, interpret explicit and implicit information and ideas, and select and synthesize evidence from different texts. Now, you don't really need to worry about the second one there because that's an assessment objective for paper 2. So for the purpose of this one, we're focusing on the first bullet point there, or the first point there. You also get AO2, which is to explain, comment on, and analyse how writers use language and structure to achieve effects and influence readers using relevant subject terminology to support their views. Now, AO2 then is the assessment objective that you are marked against for both question 2 and 3. So essentially, it's the same mark scheme, the same assessment objectives for questions 2 and 3. The only thing you do is in question 2, we look at language. Question 3, we look at structure. AO4 is to evaluate text critically and support this with appropriate textual references. So this is the one where you're agreeing or disagreeing with the statement that you're given. So for section B, which is the writing section, we get AO5, which is to communicate clearly, effectively, and imaginatively, selecting and adapting tone, style, and register for different forms, purposes, and audiences. So this is writing standard English, a description, a narrative, argument, a persuasive piece in the paper 2, obviously for those last 2. And then how to organise your information and ideas using structural and grammatical features to support coherence and cohesion of text. So that's your organisation and your content. So that's the language features you use, the way you structure your writing in terms of like paragraphing, sentence types, things like that. AO6 then is how you use a range of vocabulary and sentence structures. So sentence structures AO6 for clarity, purpose, and effect with accurate spelling and punctuation. So this is the technical accuracy assessment objective. So that's the assessment objective. And so if we look at question 1 then, so hopefully you'll have a copy of the extract with you or in front of you. As we go through each question, there will be the specific extract, part of the extract you need on the screen as well, apart from question 3, where I've just summarised the broad sort of structure of the text. So then, for question 1, we read again the first part of the source from lines 1 to 7. We list 4 things from this part of the source about the boy, and this is with 4 marks. So just sort of the key things to pick out from the question, and the most important things to do with that question then are, we focus only on the instructed lines. It doesn't matter if you pick something from line 9 that is correct. You won't get marked for it because you've not done the question correctly. The question's asked you to focus on lines 1 to 7. So only focus on those lines. Okay? It wants 4 things. So you don't need to list more than 4 things. Don't, essentially. Just get those 4 things down on the page. Move on. Okay? Then you need to focus on what it's telling you to focus on. So this wants you 4 things about the boy. So it's 4 things you learn about the boy. That is it. So just 4 things you learn about the boy, and we go on. So just paraphrase your answer to get it down nice and quick, or use a direct quote, nice and quick to get it down. I'm going to make true statements. You don't need to worry about inferences, reading between the lines, any of that sort of stuff. State what is on the page, not what you think about what's on the page, just what is literally written on that page. There's 4 facts, okay? That's all this question wants. It's not hard, it's not difficult. It just wants those 4 things. So as this is a 4-mark question, we'd be expecting to spend 5 minutes on this. Now, obviously, in your exam, we would recommend you spend 10 minutes reading the source and then obviously move on to the questions. So once you've read the source, that's 10 minutes of your time, another 5 minutes on answering this question. So if we get up there again, and here is the AO. So identify and interpret explicit and implicit information and ideas. So as I said, you only need to worry about the explicit information on this text. You don't need to only read between the lines or anything like that. So there's some essentially model answers, or what you could have talked about, and that is the boy likes the evening time best. He felt able to slow down time. He felt in charge at the top of the mound. He didn't want to go home to bed. He collected pieces of broken green glass. He collected broken brown bottlenecks. He played with the pieces of broken glass, and he built little houses from the pieces of broken glass. I mean, that's literally it. There's probably more, more there than that as well, but that's just, some sort of rough idea about what you want to do. 5 minutes, move on, okay? So now we move on to question 2, which says, look in detail at this extract from lines 5 to 15 of the source. How does the writer use language here to describe the boy playing in the evening? You could include the writer's choice of words and phrases, language features and techniques, and sentence forms. Now, the one thing before we look at the question in more detail is that sentence forms falls under language in this exam, not structure. Okay, so again, 8 marks. Now, in your exam, like I've done on the screen here, you will have a smaller, the lines, the extracted lines, as it were, on the question paper. So you won't need to actually refer to the wider source. You'll have the 10 lines or so that they want you to look at in front of you on the question paper. So again, focus on the given lines. And as I said, there's the extract with the question. So it says find 5 to 15 here. Don't worry about 16, 17, 18, 1, 2, 3, 4. They're completely irrelevant to what you need to do. Okay. So again, this is the key word in the question is language, because that's what it wants you to discuss. It doesn't want structural features. It doesn't want anything else. It wants you to focus only on the language techniques that the writer has used. And then obviously the focus of your question, so what you want to be focusing your answer on is on the boy and how he's playing. What is he doing? Okay. And then we make our inferences and things from there. So 8 marks, 10 minutes, roughly, for you two paragraphs, 2 to 3 paragraphs. So the key thing about this question, the key things to sort of remember with this question is that you must use subject terminology in your answer. If you don't, you're handicapping yourself massively. So, you're cutting yourself off there. Use the subject terminology. Don't say words and phrases. Say if it's a noun, say the noun. If it's a noun phrase, say the noun phrase. Simile, metaphor. Say it. Don't just say the word or phrase. So then once you pick that feature out, once you've got your quotation in there, say why the writer has chosen those techniques. Why would the writer use it? Okay. What does he want you to feel as a reader? Okay. So as I said, it's not just enough to highlight or pick these techniques out. The marks are going to be found in when you discuss why the writer's using them. Okay. So that's what you should be focusing on. So it's almost like two parts of the answer. First one is you identify the techniques. Second one is you say why the writers use that technique. So before we look at the model answer then, excuse me, we're just going to have a quick look at some of the potential answers or the potential things you could have discussed in your own answer. So AO2 then, as we mentioned at the start, is your ability to explain, comment and analyse how writers use language to achieve effects and influence readers using relevant subject terminology to support your views. So ideas to discuss. So as we mentioned then, there's the use of sibilants to create the uneasy feel of the game. So fragments, class, shattered and sunlight. So it's that S being repeated. The use of listing or action verbs to describe the process of his game. Pushed, making, balancing, building. The harsh, crisp sound of sunlight. Caught, glinted, to foreshadow the effects of his game. Yeah, so think about what you read later on in it, maybe. The references to time and the encroaching darkness. 9 chimes, the shadow were growing as he plays. So there's that slight element of foreshadowing maybe in those things there. The use of devices such as the simile, like a tall, thin man, to describe the presence of the lamppost and the effect on the game. Okay, so again, we're calling it a simile because we know that it is a simile. And then the description of the lamppost / man, the greyish-green coats, beaks and feathers, to further display his imaginative capacity. So, this man, is he real? Is he imagination? Is he, what is he? So those are some of the things we could have discussed. So if we look at the model answer then, coming up now. So what I've done is rather than writing the model answer from scratch, I've taken the indicative content from the mark scheme and sort of altered it so it's a bit more of a P paragraph. So this would come from the top band. This is 7 or 8 out of 8. Okay, so this is level 4. So the top band of the mark scheme. So then the writer lists 3 consecutive verbs in order to emphasize how the boy is the creator and make the creator of his make-believe world. So we start off with our opening statement, our opening point, if you will, which straight away picks out the writer's choice of language technique, and then the answer builds off that. Okay, making houses and balancing roofs on them, building towers. So we've got our quotation, and obviously the most obvious thing in the world I can say is that quotation has to link to your point, has to link to your statement. Okay, so it's like a consecutive thing. One builds on top of the other. The present participles, so got a little bit more subject terminology there, capture the boy's sense of power where he is in charge, in that it helps the reader to visualize him in the continuous act of making and building. This suggests to the reader that the boy is captivated by his game, that he's isolated away in the game, away from the rest of the world, and happy to be alone. So in the purple bit there, we've just got that description of why the writer may have done this. Okay, so it gives the idea that the boy's maybe not necessarily lonely, but he's happy in his own company, doesn't need other people. So if we move on to the second paragraph then, in then introducing a simile by describing the lamppost as looking like a tall, thin man, the writer prepares us for a change in mood. So again, opening statement's got that subject terminology because it's a simile, and it's got the quotation to support the statement, so it's all sort of built into one there. The simile can be interpreted at two levels. So what we've got here then is alternative readings or different readings of the text. In the physical world where he is playing on the mound, it can simply imply a link between a tall lamppost and a man in the dusky light could also appear tall and to tower over him in an imposing way, suggesting to the reader this man may be dangerous in some way, and the boy may no longer be in charge of his game because the man sort of taller, towering, endangering over an adult has now entered the world and might try and take control. On another level, though, it cleverly blurs the boundary between his game and the possible sinister repercussions of it. Does he just imagine the lamppost as a man, or does the lamppost come to life as a real man? The effects it's create a sinister and eerie atmosphere, one where the boundary between reality and fantasy is blurred, and that the boy may not be safe in his make-believe world. So what we do there, then, the two parts in red give us the discussion of the two different meanings, because remember, reading analysis is subjective, it's not objective, okay? It's subjective. If you can think of alternative meanings or think of different meanings, if you can back them up with quotations, if you can back them up with well-reasoned out explanations, then that's perfectly fine. It's about what you think, it's about what the text suggests to you, not to me, to you. So it's important that you remember that, okay? Provided you can support your ideas, you can sort of say whatever you think on these sorts of questions. Okay, so if we move on now to question 3, you now need to think about the whole of the source. This text is from the middle of a short story. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? You could write about what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning, how and why the writer changes this focus as the source develops, and then any other structural features that interest you. And again, much like question 2, it's only worth 8 marks. Now, obviously, as I mentioned earlier on, there isn't enough space on the page, on the screen now to get the entirety of the extra. So what I've just done is giving you a quick sort of recap of what happens, sort of key points as the text develops. So then, this gives us the opportunity. Then question 3 would ask us to focus on the whole of the source, not a short piece, the whole of the source, from the beginning, the middle, and the end. Okay, so I would suggest that they give you that with the entirety of the text to focus on, because then that allows you to think about the entirety of that development of the structure. Okay, and that's really what you'll be thinking about: is how does the text get to the end? What does it do from the first word to the end? How is it structured? How is it built? Okay, so again, only focus on structure here. Don't try not to discuss language features, because even if you just mention the word simile or metaphor, that might then accidentally go off piste and start discussing language features, which is what you don't want to do on this question. So again, as I said, you need to be thinking about how the writer moves the story along. What's the writer sort of, is he trying to build tension? Is he trying to build fear? How's he put this text together? How's he glued it together to make you interested in it, to make you want to read it? And again, 10 minutes due to the length, due to the amount of marks available. So again, subject terminology. Now, this doesn't necessarily need to be the narrow sort of technical terms. You can have dialogue, focusing, opening, closing, developing paragraphs. These sorts of it's a little bit more wider there for your subject terminology. As I mentioned, avoid discussing the language devices. Again, you need to discuss why the writer has done this. So rather than why has the writer chosen that language technique in question 2, it's now why has the writer structured the text in the way he or she has. So for this particular text, why open with 2 descriptive paragraphs? Why then move to dialogue? What are they trying to achieve? Okay, and again, before we move on to the model answer, we'll have a quick look at what you could have discussed. And again, all this is taken from the actual mark scheme. So explain, comment on, and analyse how writers use language and structure to achieve effects and influence readers using relevant subject terminology to support their views. So again, as I mentioned, this is exactly the same AO as question 2, but I know the focus is on structure, which is why I've put it in bold, and obviously language was in bold on the previous question. So the ideas that you could have discussed are the use of the third person narrative and how it adds to the chilling tone, the use of the evening, the references to time, darkness, the lamppost, darkness in the house as effective devices. The use of the initial location on the mound, and then we get the sort of real time versus imaginary, that journey that he does from the imaginary to the real time and back again, and how does that build tension, suspense, and add to the desperation and fear. The use of the characters, the boy with no name and the lamppost man, and the dialogue between them as this moves the plot and the action forward. The collection of short, sharp, declarative statements at the outset, which then moves on to the dialogue, and just that sort of development of how it moves between the boys, how that conversation between the boy and the lamppost man changes. Now, this is a tricky question. I think a lot of students do struggle with this question. So my advice would be this. One, potentially talk about the perspective. What perspective do we get, first or third? Why? Again, if you're struggling, what is the first paragraph about? What's the right and focusing your attention on at the start? Remember, that's in one of those bullet points at the start, I've mentioned at the start. And then the third one, why does it end? Why end it the way they do? Okay, these aren't just sort of cut off at random points; they're cut off in deliberate ways. So why end it the way where they have? The model answer then, excuse me. The writer structures the text at the start in order to confirm the place and perspective for the reader. So again, we get the opening statement, much like their answer to question 2, we get the opening statement, which focuses on the beginning of the text and includes reference to subject terminology in perspective. That is evening, and that a boy is on top of the mound making a new town. So the quotations that we've got here come from the opening sentence of the text. So straight away, we're talking about the first sentence, the opening in terms of the structure. This is important because in establishing a clear sense of time and place, the reader is perhaps lulled into a false sense of security. It seems like an ordinary boy playing in an innocent game. So now we've got our inferences and our explanations to why the writer is opened in this way, because that idea that it's just a boy, it's in the evening, he's just there, he's making his little town, he's quite innocent, he's quite happy, there's no sort of negativity, danger, or anything like that, those sort of things that we get later in the extract. It describes, in third-person perspective, a single character in a pleasant setting in which sunlight glinted off the tiny glass walls of his city. So, the sunlight's there, it's nice and it's happy. However, through the use of structural device time shifts, the writer makes use of references to 9 chimes. These don't just indicate that it's 9 o'clock, but also to signal a change, that the boy is perhaps moving from real play into the more darker aspects of his imagination. So we've got that connective of however to show that the text does develop and change. And again, lots of quotations, lots of subject terminology in explaining what we're thinking. The chimes further signal a movement away from a singular character to the introduction of a second in the lamppost man. In this way, dialogue between them widens the scope of the text and adds the increased tension. Again, why the writer's done that? Because we get the dialogue which builds that tension, and it widens the play out now. So it's no longer just this young boy playing, he's now got this sort of wider world that he lives in. The motif of glass and glinting light is repeated, but this time it is gloom and the glass is broken. So there's that sort of, there's links, sort of, not necessarily repetition, but that sort of juxtaposition between the opening and the closing of the extract. So juxtaposing the innocence of the game before the change to the more sinister events after the appearance of the man. So again, we link back from the end of the text to the beginning of the extract. Okay, so that's question 3 then. So on this model answer, we've talked about the start of it, and we've said that it moves on, and this is how it ends, and then the ending links back to the start of the source. So question 4 then, focus this part of your answer on the second part of the source from line 16 to the end. A reviewer wrote, this end part of the extract where the boys' games come to life takes a darker and more chilling tone. To what extent do you agree? In your response, you could consider your own impressions of the boys' game. Evaluate how the writer creates a dark and chilling tone. Support your response with references to the text, and this is worth 20 marks. So for this, we've got to say, much like questions 1 and 2, we find where we need to focus on. We don't talk about anything before line 16 because that doesn't want us to do that in the question. We ignore lines 1 to 15 because they're not relevant to this question. It's a 20-minute question because 20 marks, 20 minutes. So read the statement carefully. Remember, it's probably easier to agree. So that statement then is, this end part of the extract where the boys' game comes to life takes a darker and more chilling tone. To what extent do you agree? I would recommend you try to agree, because these texts are deliberately chosen for what they include, for the things that they have in them. So it will be easy to say that they create that tone, that tension, and that tone. So if you think about like the way we would structure our answers, with our point or our statement to open our paragraph, you've essentially already been given that in this in the bullet points to the question, because evaluate how the writer creates a dark and chilling tone. Well, you've already got that, so I agree that the writer creates a dark and chilling tone, and then you assess how and why they have achieved that. So what you're sort of doing with question 4 is you're combining the skills that you've used in question 2 and 3. So we're using subject terminology and quotations again, and we explain how those subject terminologies create that dark, sinister, chilling tone. So you can talk about you can talk about language features or structural features, entirely up to you, how we get that sense of darkness and sort of the sinister nature of the text at the end. So exactly the same as before. We look at AO4 then. Evaluate text critically and support this with appropriate textual references. So textual references then just means quotations or making reference to a part of the extract. So some ideas to discuss then. What are the themes and the ideas in the story? Okay, why they might be useful, sort of like that sort of juxtaposition between what's real and what's imaginary. What we understand about the boy in his game. What do we understand? How is he doing things like that? What's he doing? What the lamppost could be. What could the lamppost symbolise, essentially? If there is a message or a moral to the story based on the boy's game, such as the power of imagination or creation or destruction. The linguistics or the language choices linked to the descriptions of the evening, the town, the lamppost, and the man. The use of the imagery is very striking imagery, and the contrasting tone between the innocence of the opening and the dark and more chilling ending. So obviously now we're talking about that chilling, darker ending, and that's what we'll be focusing our answer on. So our model answer then. The reviewer is right to pick up on the change in tone from something innocent to chilling, as this word suggests that the reader feels uncomfortable and little disturbed by events. So straight away, that opening statement agrees with the statement made in the question. So we're saying, yeah, we agree completely because of this. Okay. As king of the mound, the boy defiantly states, I'm making a new town better than this one. It'll be a great glass city. So we've got that reference, that quotation that goes back to that initial statement and supports it. The list of adjectives and the alliterative repetition of the G consonant in great glass reinforce how impressive he imagines it to be. It also helps the reader to imagine it too, for whilst it is a tiny in reality, the adjective great can imply size as well as the impression it makes on someone. So we've got a detailed response then that includes subject terminology, and we've got the alternative readings of the quotation, in particular great, and so the different readings and the different meanings of great there. So equally, the writer uses methods such as pathetic fallacy when referring to the sky darkening. The darkening sky is suggestive or foreshadows darker events to come. So that sort of link back there to the question then of that darkness, sinister tone. So we've got a quotation in subject terminology in the next sort of point. We sense the boy's panic and fear throughout his dash home through verbs like plunged, thundered. The use of onomatopoeia in the verb thundered confirms for the reader the connection with unstoppable and out of control storm. Again, now you look at this now, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 quotations already used in this. So we're getting judicious quotes there, pushes our marks up. Got lots of references, and then it's all about the negative nature of the extract and how out of control storm, unstoppable storm is scary, it's dangerous. It sort of links to that sort of darkness. It is a metaphor that shows just how anxious he has become or how much he has lost his earlier confidence, but one which also reinforces how this game is taking on the more sinister proportions. Were the tiny creatures that once scuttled really people from this town, and why they're no longer moving? So we link back to that question, and we link back to the actual, not only the question, but the statement that was made as well. So that's question 4 then. So that's the end of section A in the reading section, so 20 marks for that one, 8 for question 2, 8 for question 3. So it's 40 marks in total for section A. So move on to section B now. Okay, so the key sort of things for section B are you will always be given an image. You'll always be given a choice of two tasks, okay? So you've been invited to produce a piece of creative writing about how children play imaginatively. Write a story set on a dark night as suggested by this picture. Or write a story about a game that goes badly wrong. So make sure you read that little statement that it gives you, because that will give you suggestions about your audience and purpose, about why you're writing and who you're writing for. Secondly, pick one of the tasks, okay? You don't need to do both. Don't try and do both, just do one. You might be given any combination of narrative or description. So for this one, you've been given 2 narratives, so 2 stories to write about. In your actual exam, it might be 1 narrative, 1 description, 2 descriptions. We don't know beforehand, so just be aware of the differences between the 2, and we'll look at that in a minute. And then obviously this one you get 45 minutes for, so 5 minutes to plan, 35, 40 minutes to write, 5 minutes to check your answers at the end, okay? So that's sort of roughly what you should be looking for. So quick thing about narrative and description. Narrative then can include a mix of perspectives and characters. Obviously, action moves forward, so you probably need someone look your central character interact with another one. It can include narrative techniques such as flashbacks, maybe dual narratives if you feel confident in your writing. Characters will interact with another one to move the plot forward. We'll have dialogue probably. But one key thing you need to do is ensure that you still describe your characters, the setting, the location, the actions. You still get those good descriptions in there and emotions, because otherwise it's just going to be quite a boring, bland story of, your character goes here and he does that and he does the other and he said hello to someone said hello back to him. There's no rather description there to build it. It's quite a dull story. So description then, focus on one detail at a time. We use the senses to explore our ideas, variety of language features, and choose perspective and stick to it. We can do description. Obviously, in a narrative, we can be a bit more looser with that. And we show, not tell, because we're using our language features to build that description. And obviously, both of them would require correct paragraphing and all that sort of technical accuracy. So essentially, when we get a narrative, if we get a narrative task, we do blue and orange boxes. If we get a description task, we do the blue box only. We don't mix and match. Whereas with narrative task, you would do everything in the blue box as well as aspects of the orange box. When you get a description task, you would only do the blue box only. So, so AO5 then, we've already spoken about what it actually means, which is content and organisation. So the top band for AO5 then is 19 to 24 marks, which would be compelling, convincing when writing. So the content side of it then would be your register, so the tone, the way you're writing is convincing and compelling for an audience, so it makes the audience want to read on. It is assuredly matched to purpose. Our purpose is this about how children play imaginatively, so we'd have that sort of, matching to that. We've got an ambitious and extensive vocabulary with sustained crafting of linguistic devices. So that's, metaphors, extended metaphors, similes, personification, that we're not just throwing any sort of lazy one that we know in there. We've thought about it, we've crafted it, we've really put the effort into writing those sort of devices, and our vocabulary is extremely wide and varied. So the organisation then, we've got a very inventive use of structural features, so single line paragraphs, longer paragraphs, short paragraphs, those sorts of things. The variety in sentences obviously falls into that as well. So your writing is compelling, incorporating a range of convincing and complex ideas. So it's a thoughtful piece of writing that's interesting for the reader. And then fluently linked paragraphs are seamlessly integrated discourse markers. So our paragraphs flow. They don't jar, they don't judder. The last sentence in one paragraph flows into the topic sentence of your next paragraph. AO6 then is your technical accuracy. Again, we've already looked at that. And then top band for AO6 is 13 to 16 marks. So sentence demarcation is consistently secure and consistently accurate. So our sentences are built correctly. They move from one to the other. We've got a wide range of punctuation with a high level of accuracy. We use a full range of appropriate sentence forms for effect, so simple, compound, complex. Standard English consistently. It's not a conversation with your mates. This is a formal piece of writing in your exam, so we remember that. So that's consistently and appropriately with secure control of grammatical structures, high level of accuracy in spelling, including that ambitious vocabulary. So what we're saying there is, you need to be, sort of pushing yourself to use varied and interesting and inventive words, but you also need to have that accuracy in the way you spell them. And so that sort of links to that. So a model answer then. So for AO5, content and organisation. So this is obviously a really sort of short one. There would be more. Obviously, you would be expected to write considerably more than just this, but this just gives you a rough sort of idea as to what you're being asked to do. So, a chill wind drifted across the park. Shivering, the boy turned his collar up as he walked down the path, passing deserted benches as he moved. The joyful sounds of children playing had died with the light. Now there was only silence, a silence that hung in the air like the hangman's noose, a silence that was waiting for the boy, waiting to give him away to those that stalked him through the cold, bitter, and desolate nights. The boy continued to move forward through the oppressive silence. The silence was deafening to the boy. It filled his straining ears. Then, as suddenly as a bursting dam, the silence was shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces by a voice that echoed through the dark, a voice that echoed through the past, present, and future of the boy's life, a voice that took any remaining spark of hope the boy had and extinguished it in a word: here. The boy slithered through the silence. Turning, the boy ran into the darkness of the park, arms flailing through the air, legs thundering through the undergrowth, heart pounding in the darkness. There was no escape. The silence had betrayed him. Okay, so if we look at the start then, we start with a single line paragraph that sets the scene. So it's a chill wind drifting across the park. We then get the metaphor. The joyful sounds of children playing had died with the lights. We know that it's night time now. And it's not very, it's not very joyous. We're getting a sinister or eerie tone. We then get the simile that adds to that tone and potentially could foreshadow future events. So that hung in the air like the hangman's noose, that sort of images links to death and aspects like that. The triplets then, so we've got adjective triplets, cold, bitter, and desolate, just to sort of finish the setting of the scene in our opening paragraphs. We then get silence, silence, silence repeated four times. And the reason why that's done is that repetition there adds emphasis to the isolation that the boy feels. He's not got anyone with him. He's alone in the silence. That isn't silence where we can't think of synonyms to the word silence. That's the silence because that repetition of silence is there for effect. It's not because we can't think of any alternate words. Okay, and then the final single line paragraph again has the personified sentence that closes the extract. So the silence had betrayed him. So again, we finish with that single line paragraph just to have that little bit of variety in our paragraphs. But we also have the personification in the end as well to sort of add to that idea that he's got one with him and he's alone and isolated. So if we look at AO5 then, which is at technical accuracy, we've got the exact same extract, the exact same piece of writing. And then we look at the first one then. So we get a comma, so shivering, comma, the boy turned up his collar. So that's that sort of the comma that introduces the rest of the sentence. We get the semicolons after path and boy, which obviously linking our two separate sentences together to add that variety of sentences. So we're not just using and. So we want that different type of sentence type. And if you look in the middle of the purple writing, we've got boy's life. So we've got the apostrophe there, correct use of the apostrophe to show ownership rather than omission. So that ownership and possession. And then that purple part, we've got the use of commas, dark, past, life. So that's that use of commas for listing in our sentences, giving us a variety of sentences. And then even though there's only one piece of dialogue in the extract, we've got here. So then speech marks are used accurately so that we know that it's there. And then in that penultimate paragraph, there's obviously a mix of sentence types, a short sentence at the end and the more complex ones used throughout, just to build that tension for the different types of writing. So that's sort of the sorts of things you should be looking to do, and you should be looking to use these different technical terms 2 to 3 times in your writing, because that would show that you have control over it. If you can use an apostrophe 3-4 times correctly, that shows you understand how to use an apostrophe. Same for semicolons. Or same for any of it really. That if you can use it once, and it shows maybe you got a bit of luck, you got a little bit lucky with it. 2, 3, 4 times, it shows this person, this student knows exactly how to use this punctuation type. And then just some sort of general exam tips. So the single most important thing you can do, particularly with Section 8, is just read the extract. Read it. I can't stress that enough. Don't start answering questions until you've read the extract. If you don't understand the extract, if you've only skimmed read it, you are going to struggle to answer the questions to the best of your ability. So make sure you read it. Number 2, be mindful of your timings. Okay, so we briefly touched on question 1, 5 minutes, question 2 and 3, 10 minutes each. Question 4, 20, question 5, 45. I mean, the timings obviously you need to sort of tweak to suit you, but they're sort of rough guidelines. Don't just sit there and daydream. Don't look around the room, see what people do, and just get on with it. Okay. Question 3, because as we mentioned on point 3, as we mentioned on question 2, don't say word or phrase. Say what type of word or phrase has been used in the writing. Remember that the question 3 is on structure, not language, so don't talk about language features in that one, as we mentioned earlier. Remember, the writer has deliberately made choices, and it's your job to say why he or she has made those choices. That's the key thing to be doing in our language analysis, our structural analysis, and our evaluation, is to say why he or she has made those choices. Number 6, always link back to be discussing the effect on the reader, because that's what sort of links to number 5 quite well, about why the writer has decided to do that, what he wants you to feel as a reader. For section B, then, for number 7 here, which is section B, question 5, use a variety of language devices. Don't just use similes throughout. If that's what if that's a device you'd like to use, mix it up with metaphors and personification, pathetic fallacy. be as accurate as possible with your spag. Again, variety is important, but make sure you're using it correctly. And then number 9, use the source as sort of inspiration as a sort of checklist. Now, obviously, don't just rip it off and rewrite what the author's written in the source. But when we say about be as accurate as possible with spag, if you've used a semicolon and you can't quite remember if it's right, check the source. If they used a semicolon in there, does it match the way you've used it? Chances are, if it has, then it's going to be accurate. You've just spent 45 minutes explaining what's good in this extract. So sort of use that to help build your own work up. So this isn't saying that you should cheat and just copy it, because obviously that's not what we're saying. But if there's something in there you think, that's how you use personification, I'll use this personification in my writing. If they've got a simile in there, get a simile in your writing and things like that. Okay, so thank you for watching. I hope it's been useful and best of luck.